Alright, so welcome back to week 2 of GameMaker. It's been a while since I've been up here, and it's been even longer since I've actually done GameMaker. So, as I mentioned, we are going to be doing a tower defense game. I've already gone ahead and prepared a few assets from an asset pack that Liz found online, and so we will be using those. And what we'll be doing is implementing it. We'll be using room layers and paths in order to control where the enemies go. We'll use tile sets in order to set up the background more efficiently and decorate that easily. And then we'll also deal with instant spawning and management for the actual enemies part of the tower defense. Spawning enemies, spawning towers, and so on. Alright, so with that very brief introduction out of the way, let us get to making games. So, we are going to start off with a new blank project. Liz, I've already got you set up with your assets in there. We're going to have a blank project, call it whatever, like workshop week 2 tower defense. As mentioned previously, you should have a file full of assets that looks like this. GameMaker is really nice about that. You can literally just select these files, drag them, you want to drop them right on top of your sprites, right here. Right? Yes, there we go. And now we have added 7 new sprites into our folder. Now that we've got our files, before we do anything, let's set up our room for the tower defense game. Oh, wait, first, my bad. Before we do anything with that, we need to create a tile set. So just go right down here to this folder, helpfully named tile sets, right click, create tile set. And we can name it whatever we want, like tile background. Doesn't matter what we name it. Tile set is just a quick and efficient way to do the background for something. Like you can, instead of having to do each individual part of the track as its own sprite and take up all of the computational power of sprites that way, you can just do them as a background tile image, and GameMaker will optimize it so it runs a lot faster, because we don't need to handle collision and everything for that. So, our tile set this time is you click on sprite, and then you go to the sprites folder, and it is way too small. There we go. SPR tile set, this one right here. And that pops up our source image. Now, right now, it is slicing that image into 64 by 64 chunks. We do not want that. We want it, it's sliced into 16 by 16. We want them to be sliced into 64 by 64. One more quick thing about tile sets, while we wait for that to get set up. One important thing to note about it is that this top left corner right here, the first tile should always be blank. GameMaker internally gives every single sprite a tile index, and if it doesn't have one, it by default uses the top left corner. So just to avoid any unexpected behaviors, the top left corner should be blank. So to actually use these tiles, you go to this room right here, and you double click on it to open it up into full view. Then over here on this left-hand side, you can see the room layers. Currently, there's 2 of them. The background layer, which is just a single static image, we'll leave that blank, and the instances layer, which is where all of our instances are going to actually be. Now, we don't need to use either of those layers right now. We are going to create a new layer right here, a new tile layer. And so if we click on that, then it will create our new layer. Over here, it will give us an option to select a tile set, and we want to select the one that we just created, tile background. And then there we go. I'm just going to zoom out the room here a little bit so we can see it all at once. And then we can just start painting with these tiles. I can select the one in the middle here, and then just paint over the whole room there. And then just give us like a nice fill coat of green. And then if you want this to be done a little bit faster, you've got all of the drawing tools up here on this bar right here. So if I just click on the fill tool right here, then I can fill in the entire area just like that. And then since we're making a tower defense game, let's try and draw a path from like one edge of the board to, you can either have the path end at another edge of the board, or you can have it end at the middle, and I've created a little tower sprite for you to actually put there in the middle and pretend like that's the castle you're defending. It doesn't matter how you draw it right now. Nothing you draw here is going to have any impact on the code in any way. It's just going to be what we're doing visually speaking, just like to give an idea of like what the path looks like. So we can do that. And then I'm just going to make like a really simple one. You should make one a bit more complicated than mine. And then you can have like little decorations dotted around. Tiles cannot be rotated. Yeah, the tiles can't be rotated, which is why the tile set I've given you has all possible rotations of all of the main tiles. Then next up is going to be turning this into an actually workable path. So again, that's going to be another layer here over on the side. You can go right down here and select Create New Path Layer. And then that will create the path layer. And then from there, you click on, you can sort of see if I scroll in here that we've got grid vertices on everything now that line up with the tiles we just created. So if I click on this point over here at the start, it'll create, oh, I need to create a path. So click down here where it says no path, and then do create. And then that will just create a brand new path for us. We can see over on assets, it will have created the path. Shouldn't have created it in the rooms. Created the path in my rooms folder, so I am going to just drag this up into the paths folder just for organizational purposes. That's just the path that we can reference if we need other sprites to follow the path, which we're going to do when we get to the coding part of it. But now that we actually have a path selected, now I can click here and it will create our first point in the path. And then I can click at every other vertex, so like where the curve turns, I click again, and then it will draw a straight line in between those points. And then I can click up here where the curve ends, and that is my path. And so if you've created a more complicated or longer path, you'll need to select more vertices. And you can, of course, use Control-Z to undo, and you can click on path segments to delete them if you made a mistake. But yes, okay. So everyone have their path segments following the path that they drew. Good, good, good. All right, now it's time to start actually coding some stuff. So, again, back to workspace. So what we are going to do is we are going to start adding in objects. And we are going to create a new object here, and we're going to call this obj game. And this is going to be like our default game object. This is just going to exist up in the corner and handle all of the timers and stuff for the game globally. Sort of like what we did last time with that. So this one's not going to have a sprite to it. It's just going to be an invisible object. And right now, the first thing well, first let's create an enemy real quick. We're not going to code the enemy yet. We're just going to have it as a placeholder. So new object, obj enemy. And we'll get around to coding this in a second. If you like, we can go here to no sprite and just select the enemy sprite to put there, just to have that available. Now scroll back up here to obj game and start actually creating the enemy. We want them to appear every second or two at the start of the path and move along to the end of the path. So we will add a create event, and we are going to use GML Visual again for this project. That's the block-based language. So GML Visual, we are going to create. So when we first create the game instance, aka when the room starts, we are going to search for timer right here. Set alarm countdown. And we are going to set alarm 2 to have a countdown of 60 ticks, aka 1 second. And so that sets a 1 second timer. And then when that timer goes off, which is if we add another event over here, that will be, we're setting alarm 0's timer. So when alarm 0 happens, we are going to just reset that timer to another 60 seconds. And we are going to spawn an instance right here. Create instance. And the instance we are going to create is object obj enemy, the one we just created there. And we can keep everything else the same. X and Y position won't matter because we'll be manually setting that using the path, and should be on the instances layer, but I think I've realized I forgot an important step. If we go back to room here, we want to drag the instances layer so that's on top of all of the other layers, because otherwise the tiles would be drawn on top of our instances, which is not what we want. Okay. And then finally, before we test it, let's just get the enemies moving, which is going to be add event create. So when our enemy here is created, then we want it to follow a path, which is going to be this one right here. Let's start following a path with an instance. So we drag this in. Our path is going to be path 1, the path that we just created and drew on our layer there. And absolute is set absolute to true, which means that it will be following the path from its position, not relative to the object, but relative to the top corner of the room, which is what we want to have happen. So if absolute is false, that means the path will be relative to the start of the path will be the same as the object's current location. So like if you want like a bolt to do a loop-de-loop, then you draw a loop-de-loop path and have it be relative to the object. But we want it to be relative to the room, which is going to be absolute positioning. So we want to set absolute to true. Yep. And then speed, we'll crank it up to say 3. We don't want them to go too terribly fast. Yep. And then finally, one more thing. If we scroll down to sprites and we go to SPR enemy, big, right here where it says origin, we want to change the origin to middle, up here in the top right corner of the enemies. When you're in the sprite editor for the enemy, we want to change the origin to be middle center for that enemy. That way it's going to snap its center to the center of the path, which is what we want. 3232. Yep, that drop down here also works. Okay. So is everyone all caught up with what I've said so far? Are we ready to start testing? Any questions? All right, let's open it up and make sure that this works. Drum roll, please. You can hit the run button up here to start it. Top corner right there. Please work. I forgot to actually add the start thing. My bad. Yes, go to room, go to the instances layer right here, and then switch over back to assets. And you want to take the game object right here and drag that object from here into, it doesn't matter where you put it, but we're going to put it at the top left corner of the room, just so we know where it is. So if we've dragged that there, that will question mark means there's no sprite associated with this, which is what we've said it should be. From assets, you drag this obj game and drag it into here. Yours works? No. Nope, just the game. Yeah, the game will be in charge of spawning enemies. So if everything goes well, it should look like this. That's what it should look like. Do you have that? So here is, so for object game, this is what the create event looks like. So object game's create event is just set alarm to 0. I mean set alarm 0 to 60. And you can type in on the toolbox here if you need any help finding things. Like this search bar right here will show you what you need. Okay, you got this one? Okay, and then over here, the add event alarm 0, this one right here, that's what I've got created right here, and that's what this event looks like. Do you understand how events work in GameMaker? Okay, I'm sorry I kind of glossed over that. So what we're doing now is this window is a list of events, which are things that could happen in the game, like an object being created or an alarm going off. And then when the event fires, this window over here is the code that we have attached to that event. So this is going to be what happens when that event goes off. So for this right here, what we are saying is when we create the object game, so when the game starts, we are going to set alarm 0 to 60 frames. And then that just sets up a timer for the future. And then right here, this alarm 0 event is when alarm 0 goes off, set alarm 0 to another 60 frames, so we reset the timer, and create an enemy instance. Okay. That makes sense? Okay, do you have this code implemented? Go implement that, and then I will show you what the enemy code looks like. Yeah. It doesn't end because normally the alarm will stop after it goes off once, but because of this block of code right here, every time the alarm goes off, we reset it for another 60 frames. So it's constantly being reset by itself.
And we are running in 60 FPS on GameMaker, right?
Yes.
Okay. So that equates to one enemy every second.
Correct.
Indefinitely.
Indefinitely. When we get into more advanced, I say more advanced, more complicated. When we have more time to actually put forth effort into this, then we can set it up so that it will manually stop the timer when the game isn't running or in between waves or whatnot.
For some kind of condition to be met.
Correct, yes. But for right now, we've just got it set to automatically spawn enemies at an even rate, just so we can demonstrate how enemies work. Yeah. I think you still have to make the enemy code itself, right? But that's like, yeah, that is really simple. Right here. This is the code for object enemy. It just has a single event. This event will trigger on each enemy whenever that enemy is created. And the only block of code for that is right here. Start following path, and you need to make sure it's the correct path, its speed is free, and you've checked this absolute box down here. Mm-hmm. Okay. And the other thing is that the difference between instances and objects. What you're working on right here is an object, which isn't anything in the game, but it's something that could be in the game. And whenever an enemy spawns, that spawns in an instance of that object, which has its own independent variables in position and whatnot. So that's how GameMaker uses the terminologies. You create instances of objects, and then you edit the code for the objects directly in the game editor like this. I believe you would need two completely different paths. From what I know, there is no way to use a path to have a conditional to it. Each path has to be its own single straight line with no branches. So you would need to create two paths for the entire track, and the paths would just be identical except for the split. Actually, alternatively, you could create 4 path segments. One short one up until the split point, one for each branch of the split point, and then one for the end after the split. Ooh. Okay. Yeah, just bump my elbow. It's fine.
Okay. Okay. Why a fourth one? Wouldn't just the second and third one that you mentioned connect to one single point?
Well, if you end at that point, then yes. But if you want to have a single endpoint afterwards, then you need a fourth segment that goes to that endpoint. Mm-hmm. All right. Do you have everything over there? Would you like me to? It looks like it's working. Yeah. Okay. So it looks like it's following the path that you set. You can go back and edit that if you like. It looks like it's good enough for now, and I'm just going to continue on with the lesson. Okay. Yeah. So next part of the lesson, we are going to start creating towers. So we are going to we want to recenter the collision for the towers as well. So if we go here to tower base, double click, there we go. So this is going to be the sprite for our tower base right here. We want to again scroll over right here to our origin, and we want to set that to 32 by 32. That sets like when you call it to move to a certain position or you check its position, it's not going to check like the whole thing. It has to check a single point. And so we are saying that the point where this is located for all intents and purposes is smack dab in the middle right there. So like if I say spawn an arrow at this location, it's actually going to spawn the arrow in the middle of the tower instead of awkwardly spawning it at the top left corner of the tower. So before we finish up, we have one more sprite that I want to reposition, and it's this one right up here. But this one, as you can see, the sprite itself is actually twice as tall. So it is a 60 is, what's the numbers on this one? 128 by 64. That's the number I'm looking for. And so we can't just center it. We need this to be at 32 because the X position is still the same, but 96 for our Y position. That's 32 plus 64. So it will be right down here on 3/4 of the way down.
You figured this out just by counting the pixels?
I mean, it's basic math. I just added 64 to the previous number because it doubles in height, which means that we need to move the point down by that much, 64 pixels. Yep. All right. So now that we have these two set up, let's actually create our tower. And we're going to do the same sort of thing that like in Kingdom Rush style towers, where you have those foundations already on the field, and you can click on them, and then from there that foundation builds up into a tower. Yeah. So let us create right here, right click on objects, create new object. And we are going to call this obj tower. And we are going to start with these in the sprite of SPR tower base. That one right there. And so start off with the create event. Yep. And first things first, for our create event, we are going to create a handful of variables for our tower here. So we want this right here, assign variable. So first variable is going to be the tower built, and that's going to be what tower is built here. And we are going to start that off with a string that just says none. And make sure to use quotes around this string. And then we will be updating that as we build the timer. Then we want to have a value of cooldown. And we're going to start that off at 0. When the tower is built, it will be periodically increasing this cooldown to represent that it's fired, then it decreases back down, and when it hits 0 again, then it will fire again. We'll go over that later. And then finally, this is just a little piece of magic that I use. We are going to do depth. And so you can see here, as I'm typing into autofill options, depth is actually an inbuilt variable. That's like its z-index. Things with lower numbers are drawn on top of things with higher numbers. And so because the towers can potentially overlap with both themselves and with the track, we want the towers that are like bottommost on the screen to be drawn on top. So that way it gives an illusion of depth. And so for this, in order to make the ones towards the bottom be drawn on top, we will set depth equal to negative y. So the negative value of its y position, because the things with a lower value get drawn on top. So we want the higher the y value, the lower the depth value. You'll see when we actually make it. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So negative y is what we want for this. And then let's really quick just actually create the script that allows us to build the towers. So again, as I said, when we click on a tower, we want it to be built up. So we will go down here and create a new event that happens when left pressed. So when left mouse pressed, we want to go back here, assigned value, and we said tower build. This one right here, this variable should be set to arrow, and we'll just reference that in our own code to say now it's an arrow tower. And then we want to update its sprite, which is, here we are, set sprite, change the sprite of an object instance, and we'll drag that in, and we will set the sprite to SPR tower arrows. Okay, this won't make it fire yet, we'll go over that in a minute, but this should be when you click on a tower, it will build up. Before you can actually test it, is start putting some of those towers onto your room. So if you double click back here on the room, then over here, if we click on assets and make sure your instances layer is selected, then we can grab this OBJ tower asset and drag it onto the field. And then next up is going to be shooting the arrows once we get this set up. All right, are you good? Okay, then let us get ready to do the arrows. So first things first, like with all of the other sprites, you want to go up here and you want to go over and set its origin to be middle center. And because the arrow is a smaller sprite, that's going to correspond to 2610 if you type in the numbers manually. Then after you've got this set up, we are going to once again create a new object, and we'll just call it obj arrow, and we'll set its sprite to be whatever, arrow, there it is. Yep, just make a new object for obj arrow. Yep. And now for this object, we are going to have it, when we spawn in an arrow, we are going to have it automatically find the closest enemy and start shooting towards it. So we are going to do instance create. Let's see if I remember this. That will be the tower. We'll handle spawning that in a second. Let's get the arrow moving in the right direction first. So instance create, and we are going to set closest enemy to, let's see. Yep. I'm trying to remember. That sounds correct. Yes, right here, instance nearest. And this is just going to be one of the inbuilt functions, which, as the name implies, gives you the nearest value. For x and y, we are going to do the arrow's own x and y. So that's just x comma y. And then obj is going to be obj underscore enemy. Oh, that's not correct. That's not correct. Yes, it will automatically find the nearest instance, and it should not be relative, because that's not relative to the screen, that's relative to the previous value. So like, if we wanted to add 1 to a variable, then we'd check the relative box and just type in 1 in this value box. But because we are setting this directly to a value, we don't want it to be relative to the previous value. Yep. Okay, you got this set up? And now let's actually start using that. And angle, here we are. Set image rotation. And we are going to set image rotation to, yep, to another inbuilt function, point direction, right here. And this function is very simple. You give it 2 points and it will tell you the direction between them. So we want the direction to be from x, comma, y, that's our own x and y, to closest enemy dot x, closest enemy dot y.
So it checks both the arrow checks one and then the closest enemy.
Yes, and it will calculate the angle between the two of them and set the image rotation to that. And then likewise, we can, which movement do we want to use? So here we are. This one's probably going to work. Set point direction. And then for this one, we'll do closest enemy dot x, closest enemy dot y. That will set, GameMaker stores speed and direction value for all objects, and it will automatically move an object in its direction by its speed every frame. So we don't need to worry about moving it ourselves. The game will do it for us as long as we give it an initial speed and direction. And so this is giving us the object the initial direction, and then to give it the initial speed, that's this box right here, set speed. And we'll make the arrow go zoom in. 20 seems like a good enough speed. Not 200, that's too much. But yes. That's why we have the enemies moving slow and the arrows moving fast.
It should be fast enough to get to them.
Yeah.
Would you be able to do this on every step, so it changes this on every step instead?
You could, but that could lead to some weird behavior. Most tower defense games don't do that, I think. Like, Bloons Tower Defense doesn't, I know. Arrows always go straight, and they just have the projectile speed really high compared to the balloons. Yes. And sometimes you can actually see, like, a monkey will miss a pink balloon. Yeah.
Compare a pink balloon to a dark monkey. The dark monkey has a very good chance of missing.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, so if you wanted to, you could update this information every frame to make it so that would not happen, because the arrow would be homing. But because that leads to some weird looking behavior, I prefer to do it this way. Okay, so now we have the arrow actually flying where we want it to go. It's time to make the arrows spawn in. It's going to be slightly more complicated, but mostly just a bunch of conditional logic. So right up here, double click on OBJ Tower, and we are going to create a new step event, which will happen every frame. And so, every frame, we want an if statement. We're doing a step event. And we're doing tower built is equal to arrow. And again, that's in quotes. That's the value that we set it to before. Whenever we build it, we set tower built to arrow. And now we're actually checking that. If the tower is built, then we want another conditional statement here. If, let's scroll out a little, cooldown is greater than 0. So if cooldown is greater than 0, meaning that our tower is still cooling down, then we want set variable. And this is going to be where that relative checkbox comes in handy, because we set cooldown equal to -1 relatively speaking. And so that will just subtract 1 from cooldown every frame if it's greater than 0. And if cooldown is not greater than 0, So that is our else block right here. Else. And now here is going to be where we spawn in our arrows. But we only want it to spawn in an arrow if there's an enemy in range. So once again, we are going to get the closest enemy. And in fact, we can copy that. Like if I just go here and I copy this block from the start of arrow create, and I do paste it in here, drag that onto the else statement, then that will automatically find the nearest enemy, same as last time. And then we need one more if statement down below it here. And we are going to say if point distance this time. If point distance closest enemy, no. We want x, y, because it's the same argument as the previous one. You give it 2 points, it calculates the distance between them. So our own x and y, and then our closest enemy dot x, closest enemy dot y. And if that distance is less than, we'll say 100 pixels, we'll do 120 pixels just to give it a bit more range. Then it will create instance. And we're creating an instance of object arrow. And we do x and y is equal to 0, relative check marks checked, which means that it's relative to its own position, aka we're spawning it right on top. And then finally, we want variable, set variable cooldown to 45. And that will give us a cooldown of 45 frames in between each shot. And so theoretically, this should work if we run it. Yes. Scroll out, yes. Said this was a big one. So we cannot read a single word on screen, but this is saying if the tower is built, if the tower's variable is arrow, then check to see if cooldown is greater than 0. Cooldown is greater than 0, then we're still cooling down, subtract 1 from that. If not, then it finds the nearest object, checks nearest enemy, checks to see if that enemy is 120 pixels or less away, and if so, it will create an arrow and set its cooldown to 45. Yes. This one right here. Yeah. Yes, I took this. This is the same block as last time. It's assigning it to the tower this time. I could have just retyped this block manually, but I just thought it was easier to quickly copy and paste it.
Wait, so the value is still the same?
No, the value would be different.
What are the values now?
Well, no, I'm sorry. What we type in is the same, but it will be assigning to a different variable, since this is going to be for the tower instead of the arrow. But the actual text inside both these boxes are identical.
Okay, and for the variable underneath, what's the variable name?
That is point distance, and the 4 arguments to that function are x, y, closest enemy dot x, and closest enemy dot y. So enemies come in, we have a tower, and as they get close enough, arrows will shoot at them. So it's weird that we still need to do quite a few things, like make the arrows despawn after a little bit, or make the arrows actually deal damage. But we have them actually starting to shoot. And then I can get just a bunch of towers out here for all kinds of arrows. Because look, here's how I can make arrows kill enemies. I go here, I add collision with objects, obj enemy.
This is for arrow, right?
Yes, this is for arrow. So this is saying whenever an arrow collides with an enemy, then you go over here and you do this.
Destroy.
Yep.
This is inside of arrow object?
Yes. Inside of arrow object, give a collision event with object enemy.
Destroy.
Yep.
Kill.
Well, you want two of them. The first one, if you this little arrow right here next to the X, that will determine what it's applying to. And so by default, all values apply to the self, which is what we want for the first one. But for the second one here, we want it to apply to the other.
You would put all.
Then it will destroy everything on screen.
Oh.
I think so.
Let's try.
Well, let's try it.
Let's try it.
Well, if you have health bars, how would you improve health bars? For the enemies?
I can. Yeah. Okay. This looks like it's working.
A variable called health means
Mhm.
every time they seem to collide,
Yeah.
they lose a certain amount of health,
Mhm.
and then if health equals 0, destroy the instance.
Yes, so we can do that real quick here. I'll show you how to do that. So delete the thing that applies to the other, and we will instead say variable, set variable health. That's not how you spell health.
This is still within the arrow, right?
Um,
Oh, because we just have
yeah.
a variable of enemy health and then
Yes.
we allow you to decrease it, right?
Yep, so right there, again, we're using this assigned variable to decrease the health, but we want to set that to other again.
What do you say?
But it's
-1 relative. So that takes off 1 health each time, or however much health you want. And make sure that you again set it to apply to the other instance. And then enemy. Yeah, I don't get why it's doing that, but if it works, it works.
so we just need to set health inside of the enemy.
Correct. So right here, create set variable health to like 3 or something.
This is within where
Now we're doing it within the enemy create event.
underneath following event.
Yep. Or wherever. It doesn't really matter as long as it's within the create event. And then just to make sure it dies, I'm going to create a new step event inside of the enemy. And we are going to have if health.
Oh, I see. We check that exactly.
Yep. If health equals 0, then destroy itself. Kill. Yes. No?
It's because I noticed this, it's because you create a tower before any enemy spawn, so there's an exception. So just spawn a tower after the enemy.
Okay.
So we have
Why did...
we have 2 destroy instances. One with the arrow and one with the arrow and one with the enemy.
Yes.
Well, theoretically, if we're doing it by health bar, I'm going to scroll back.
Yeah, we have one to destroy the arrow inside the arrow. Collision.
I think health is a reserved variable name.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So
So, yeah, we'll just call it E health, something not reserved. So, yeah, E underscore health, we'll call it. That's not reserved. And then E health here, if that equal to 0, destroy this instance.
So we're starting with the enemy at -1 health and everything is taken.
No? I'm starting with it at 3 health.
inside of the create and then set the enemy.
Yeah, inside. Yep. You can set it to whatever you want, but yes. Are you following along? I've been sort of bouncing around a bit here, sorry. Not after this. We want a step event right here. So again, for the enemy, we want the step event to look like this, which is just real simple. If E health equals 0, destroy instance.
There you go.
It's working. Okay, good.
Yeah, you're right. For some reason, it's a reserved variable.
I think you like the implication is you're supposed to use that for the player's health, so it's a global variable that can automatically be referenced by everything.
So if you need anything other than help for the player, like what we did for enemies, he needs that it's something separate.
But yes, okay. Yes, throw some slides up on screen at you. Here we go. Thank you very much for coming today. Important announcement. We are having a game jam in just about 2 weeks at this point. 2 weekends from now. And that will be really fun. I am excited to actually attend this semester. Liz has been doing a great job preparing for that and getting that ready for all of us. So if you want to come, we got QR code right here with some info. And yeah, thank you very much. Yes, feedback form as well if you'd like to get feedback on my presentation. Yes, next week, April 3rd, we will be having our final workshop on GameMaker, where I will be doing, I'm not sure what, but probably the stuff I wanted to get to today but didn't have time for.
What did you want to get to?
There were a few other things I wanted to do today, like particle effects was a big one I wanted to get to today.
Oh yeah, because they last time they changed it completely, right?
Yes, they have changed particle effects completely. I have no idea how particle effects work anymore. Further research will be needed on my end before we can do that. But yes, we'll be doing particle effects, we'll be doing sound effects. There's a cool little feature called animation paths, which I didn't have time to go over today in depth, but I'd like to show off next week.